Hi, everyone. I am joined here by the wonderful Barbara Amoros. I don't even know how to say your last name in
Me
English.
neither.
How do you say it when you order a Starbucks?
It's like Amoros.
Amoros.
Yeah.
See, I
But
would be like Amoros.
yeah, right. Actually, I never asked this question to myself. So,
Perfect. This is the perfect place to ask these
right.
type of questions. I know I say Balderrama.
Valderrama. But people
Yeah.
like sometimes they don't like pronounce their R's, so I guess it's kind of hard.
That's why I say it like that.
Yeah.
Sometimes I've gotten like Ariana, or even sometimes I get like Orini,
Oh.
which is like, that's not even what I
No,
said.
but I love it when you say Ariana with an O. Like people are like, "Oh, okay."
Yeah.
It's hard to miss it. So.
Yeah, I think, well, you've been in a lot of my introducing to
Yeah.
people, and I always say the same thing, like, oh, it's like Ariana Grande, but with an O. And it was
Yeah.
like,
Oh, yeah.
it's just a good conversation starter, you know?
It is like I met a girl in Austin.
Yeah.
Her name was like Oriana, and I was like, "Oh, where are you from?" Like, I haven't met any Orianas that are not Venezuelan, and she's like, "Oh, I'm Venezuelan," and I was like, "That makes sense." So
Honestly, there's no one that I know that's Latino that is not from Venezuela that's name is Oriana.
no, me neither. Like, I know so many Orianas, but they are all Venezuelan. So.
And I think you even change your name when you come here to the States. Like, you start saying, like, instead of saying Oriana, I don't know why I start Oriana. Why do we do that?
Right, it's the same thing with like Barbara and like Barbara. O sea, like
Yeah, but like when you meet someone that speaks English, you automatically go into Barbara.
right, automatically. I never say like Barbara ever. So
I didn't even notice like the transition, you know, like you just like do it. And nobody tells you to do it.
no,
You just
but-
like unconsciously start saying your name like that.
But they'll get it, right?
Yes.
Because if I say Barbara, they're gonna be like, such a weird name, and I'm gonna be like Barbara, and they're like, oh, Barbara, okay.
I think it's because you get that first initial reaction when they're like, huh? And you're like, okay, I need to.
I don't know that reaction. I don't know. It's just I don't like it.
It's
So,
infuriating
yeah.
sometimes because it's like, obviously you can't expect them to know how to pronounce something, but at
Right.
the same time it's like, I wish I didn't have to explain myself and just say
Yeah.
say my name the way that I want.
But I don't know. It's something not only with the name, but when you say like, "Oh, I'm from Venezuela," and they're like, "Oh, Minnesota," and I'm like, "No, Venezuela," like
Okay, so obviously there's a reason why you're here, and it's not just because you're my best friend.
Okay.
But also I think you're one of the most amazing, successful women that I know.
I appreciate it, especially coming from you. So
I appreciate that too. I'm trying to be better at taking compliments because I'm usually like, no, you are, you know?
oh, I know it's so hard. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's just the whole mentality of, oh, I'm not as good as the next person. You know, we've been talking about it
Yeah.
literally like before we started this. So it's like that whole thing like, oh no, but don't compliment me. I'm complimenting you kind of thing.
We need to be like, okay, thank you.
Yes.
I appreciate it. Like,
Yes, that's why when you said that, I was like, I appreciate it too. But obviously not only, like I said, we have like a relationship, we're friends. I think that you've accomplished a lot of things in your life, not only on your career, but on a personal level, which I think is even more important, because if you're not good at your personal level, then you're not going to be good in your career or
Right.
with your relationships or with your family, with your friends. So I think it's also important to look at all of the things.
Yeah, I 100% agree, because life is not just work, and that's something that we have been talking about it. I've been like battling with like life. There's so much more than that. So I agree.
Yes. And even though there's obviously more, I do want to talk about your work. Okay. Everything that matters is your work. No, but really why I want to bring up your work is because you had to overcome a lot of personal challenges, which is not just about the job itself. If you don't know and you're listening to this right now, Barbara works at Google. And, when you think about Google, what are the main like misconceptions that people have about when you first tell them, oh, I work at Google? Like, what do you think they think about?
Yeah, they usually assume, oh, you're super smart. And like, sure, like you have to be smart, but there's a lot of other things that matter, not just being smart. Right. So I feel like that's the first thing. The second one, they assume that I don't work, that because I have so many perks. They're like, oh, you spend all day playing ping pong and, doing stuff like that. And not at all. Like we also like work. So I guess those two are the most common ones.
I think it's just because they saw the movie Google.
I know, the
and
internship.
The internship. And they just assume that you just go on slides everywhere.
I know, but I've also seen like TikToks from like girls and stuff like, oh, a day in the life of a girl that works at Google. And they honestly don't work. And I'm like, who are these people? Because that's not me.
Those are not your coworkers for sure.
Yeah, no, I don't know what they do, honestly, but
maybe that's the marketing strategy. They're like, we need to hire influencers to make Google seem fun.
Yeah.
Which I've worked with you at Google, and it is fun for like as the first time. But I imagine if you already go every single day, it's not like you just go to the game room every time you have a free time. Like you have work to do. Like you actually have meetings and things to do.
Things to do. Like I can't go like every day. Like I go once in a while with like my coworkers and stuff like that. But it's not like every day, right? So yeah, like I like the perks and the food, all of that. But I also work.
It's good to know that you also work.
Yeah.
So let's like back up in time when we graduated from college. Obviously, we know each other from college, from our not freshman year, but
I felt like it was freshman.
It was
kind of sophomore. I don't know.
Sort of in the transition of freshman and sophomore.
No, actually, it was freshman.
Yeah, it was freshman.
It was the second semester. It was like spring 2017.
Yeah,
right?
You were right.
Yeah.
And after college, when you finally got that job at Google, which we were all like cheering her on so bad. We were like, oh my God, what's going to happen? Because there was a lot of interviews that came into the process.
Yeah, I guess we have talked about this, like, and usually it's like, oh, what's your like road to Google, right? And for me, it's different. Like everyone has a different like path, I will say. But for me, I got an interview for an internship, right, as a software engineer, and I didn't pass the interview, right? So at that time, I was like, oh, well, maybe I'm not good enough for these types of companies. So when it came like the time where I had to apply to full-time jobs, I was like, I'm not going to even waste my time doing this. Because like, what's the point? Like you have to study so hard for the interviews. It takes a lot of time just interviewing. I feel like job hunting is like a job in itself because you have to do so much, right? Like cover letters, tailoring your resume for each job is so much work. So I was like, I'm not gonna even waste my time. There's no point, right? But like one day, like a recruiter reaches out via email and they're like, oh, I know you applied for an internship because, they keep your resume on file and they reach out if there are other options, like other roles. And that's not a lie because it happened to me. They usually say, oh, we're going to keep your information on file, right?
And you're like, yeah, sure.
And you're like, sure. And okay, this time around, it was true. And they reached out via email, right? And I'm like, oh, no, I just ghosted the recruiter. I was like, there's no way. So I don't know, like a couple of weeks, like 4 weeks passed and I just forgot about that email. And then like I'm talking like with my parents very casually, I mention it and they're like, are you crazy? Like you have to apply. And I'm like, okay, whatever. So I just like sent my resume. I didn't even change it, honestly. I usually like would change it depending on the role.
Yes.
And I just forgot about it. I never thought like, oh, how's my application? No, never.
You're like, it's not going to happen.
It's not going to happen. A couple of weeks later, the recruiter reaches out and they're like, oh, we want to interview you, right? And I'm like, what? This is crazy. Okay, so I went through the interview, but every time, like, I was like, no, I'm not good enough. I'm not gonna like get it, but at least it'll be an experience, like practice for other interviews and stuff like that. And then like 1, 2, 3, and then like every time I will pass them, and then like one day the recruiter calls me and she's like, you got it. And she tells me about the offer and I'm like, oh my God, I feel like that day I felt so good. I was like calling my parents, they were crying with my mom, and it was a super happy day. And then it started, and of course it's not just getting the job. After you get it, there's so much more too, like other like you're in, right? But there are other like obstacles. I wouldn't call them obstacles.
Challenges.
Maybe challenges, right?
Yes.
That you also need to overcome.
How did you feel when like did your expectations, were your expectations met when you started the job? Or were you like, oh my God, what am I doing? Like, who am I in this? Like, did you feel like you weren't ready for the job, that imposter syndrome? Like, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
100% yes. So this role was different. It wasn't like a software engineer role, which at first that was what I wanted, right? Especially when you're studying computer science, which was my major, you usually are like, everyone's like, okay, I want to be a software engineer. But there are so many different things that you can do with this degree, right? You can go be a software engineer. You can be a consultant. You can be so many different things. So I started this role, which was a rotational program actually for new grads. So I started with like 20 other people, and you rotate through different roles, and at the end of the year you kind of like pick the one that you like the most, but you're not like guaranteed to get it. So it's kind of like that. And I felt like that program, they put you in like very uncomfortable positions, let's put it that way. It's customer facing. Every single role I rotated through was customer facing, and it's also technical. So I was like developing my skills in both. And I didn't feel ready, especially because I had no clue about the cloud, and it was like a cloud role, right? So I started with sales. So you can imagine in sales, like I knew a little bit about the product I was selling, but usually I was so scared that people would ask me questions I didn't know the answer to. So that was the first like thing. I had so much anxiety because I was talking to these like people that were like directors and C-level executives. I was just out of college, right? So I was like, it gave me so much anxiety, but I had to power through it. And I came to a point where I realized that it doesn't matter if you don't know the answer to something, for example. And I don't know if I'm going through a different route than your question, but
No, keep going.
I feel like you don't need to know the answer to everything. You just have to like be, you don't want to give them the wrong answers. Let's start with that. Like, I don't want to give you incorrect information just to like answer your question, right? So it's more like, I'll follow up with you. Like, I'm not sure. I want to give you the wrong information. I'll follow up with you. And I usually will send these like super long emails after like I research and all of that. But I think it's important, especially when you're like in a sales role, to build that trust, right? So the customer knows that you are their partner, and that you're going to actually help them. You don't care too much about like selling. You care about helping them, right? So I felt like that was my approach. And we all approach it differently, because at first I thought like, oh, if you want to be good at sales, you have to like speak a lot and be super extroverted. And, that's not the case. I feel like everyone has their different styles, but you need to like ask a lot of questions, for example, to really understand what your customer needs, right? You don't want to like pitch something out of the blue and maybe that's not what they need, right? So first it's like asking a lot of questions, and it requires a lot of like listening skills, and actually listening and understanding what they really need. Or sometimes it's even reading between the lines. Maybe they say something, but there's something else that they mean, and there's another pain point that they're not like explicitly telling you. So I guess that's the first thing. And those people skills, I never like developed them in college, just because I studied computer science. It was very technical. They will send you the homework, you will do it.
Right.
And if it was right, it was cool. Same thing as math. You do the problem, it's okay, you get like an A. But here there's so many different skills right out of college that we need to develop. Like, you can be super smart, but that's not the only thing that's going to make you successful. So I felt like this role helped me with those skills and develop them. And I guess that's where I was lacking the most. Not so much in the technical side, more on the like people skills.
Yeah. There's also this expectation, right? That just because you work at Google, you're supposed to know everything. And I think it's normal that you felt that way, right? Like, I feel like a lot of people probably feel the same way that you felt. Only like being like, when you're talking to a customer, you think that you first need to be super outgoing, super like, sales pitchy, like, yeah, you need this, you need that. And then you need to answer all of their questions. And I think you took it into a very like humble position of just saying, hey, I don't know everything.
Right.
Not anything. I don't know everything, but I can find the answers for you.
Yeah.
And I think that's what stood you apart from others, is just the care, because that's what I hear when I hear you speak about it. I just feel like I'm taken care of, and I think that feeling is what consumers and customers like just look for, right? They just want to be heard. They want to be asked the right questions and not just assume their needs. And I think by you doing that, you sort of provided them a safe space for them to actually, oh, maybe I didn't need this before, but now I feel because of your questions that I actually want something else.
Right.
So you gave them the opportunity to do that.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And I feel like you don't need to know everything, right? It's more those people skills or those soft skills are the ones that, set us apart, and building that trust. You want them to trust you. Like, you can be super smart, but if they don't trust you, you're not getting anywhere. So you don't have to be super outgoing or anything. It's more like knowing how to connect with people, I will say. Yeah.
That's a really hard job too.
It's super hard, and it requires a lot of not training, but like exposure, I would say. You can never start something and expect to be good at it at first. You need to be like willing to fail. I had so many like disaster of calls, like so many, and you need to embrace failure and learn from that. You cannot be like, oh, I had one bad call like with a customer. Now I suck. I can't do this. No, you need to be like, okay, what can I learn from this? And how can I avoid this next time? Because we're going to always make mistakes. Like, if it's about making mistakes, and it's important how you respond to that, right? So I feel like I did a lot of that. I failed so much. I had so many bad calls, projects where I could have done a better job. And looking back, I can be like, oh, I could have done this better, or I could have done that better. But without like putting so much blame on me, because sometimes we're so hard on ourselves, right?
Yes.
So it's without blaming me, more like, oh, this is a learning experience. I need to embrace it and just learn from this. And that's it. It's not bad. It's good, actually. So we cannot expect to be perfect the first time around, or second or third, or even like the 10th time around.
I love that you said that, just because I feel like it's not even about the mistake. It's about how you handle the mistake.
Right.
And the fact that you just look back and you're like, oh, this is how I approached it. This is how I can improve. And this is how can it be better. And if I hadn't made that mistake, how are you going to know that you should do better? So I think you're just really good at embracing those mistakes in general.
Believe me, I wasn't good. I had to. If not, I was going to be miserable, right? So, and it's not only at the job. It's just in life in general. We could have done so many different things in relationships, friendships, in everything. It's just not just work. It's in every aspect of your life, you can apply this concept. And I try to. Sometimes, you know me, I'm super hard on myself. But this is something that's in the works, and I'm working on it. And
how have you worked on your self-talk? Because I know that that's something that I struggle with a lot, because you are your worst critic, right? You are the person that is going to criticize you the most. And then your loved ones are going to be like, hey, but you did all right.
Right.
Like, you always see the best on your friends, but then you can't do that for yourself. It's so weird, because you wouldn't be as hard to your friend as you are on yourself. So how have you like dealt with that self-talk that sometimes can turn negative? How do you like bring yourself back to positive?
Yeah, no, that inner voice, she's a mean girl, like, honestly. So
she's a Regina George.
Regina, yeah. So I feel like that part is hard, and I feel like I'm working on it. Like, I'm very conscious that it happens. And sometimes when I find myself having those thoughts, like, oh, you suck, you're the worst, you're not smart enough, good enough, whatever that I tell myself, I'm like, okay, wait. I kind of like think about my thought. It's so weird. I think about it and I'm like, okay, wait. Why am I having these thoughts? Why am I telling this to myself? And something I heard, I don't remember where they're like, would you tell this to your like 10-year-old self? Like, would you tell 10-year-old Barbara, oh, you suck, you can't do anything? I will never tell that to myself, like to my 10-year-old. Same as with my friends. So we need to be a little bit more gentle with ourselves and, forgiving, just like you will forgive somebody else for a mistake, your partner, your friends. You have to do that for yourself, because it's hard, but
it's so hard.
Yeah, but we need to be conscious of it. I feel like once you like acknowledge that it's happening, you don't have to be perfect. It's the same thing as with like positive thinking. You assume like some people are like, oh, you always have to be positive and have positive thoughts. No, like, we have negative thoughts, but we just need to like pinpoint when it's happening. Like, okay, wait, this is happening right now. Stop, wait. And then you realize that you need some like self-care time, or like sometimes I will have these thoughts in college where like it was the pandemic. I wouldn't leave my house. I was all day studying. And, I will spend like, I don't know, I don't know, 6 hours studying, and I will feel miserable, and I will be having these terrible thoughts, and I will be, okay, wait, I need to go out for a walk. And usually after the walk, I was feeling so much better. I wasn't having these bad thoughts, and it helped a lot.
It's just that acknowledgement then. It's just like that. If you take 5 seconds to pause, you can just pinpoint, oh, wait, why am I feeling this?
Right.
It's just like if you second guess the feeling sort of thing.
You have to second guess it. Like, your thoughts are not a reality. You have to be like, okay, wait. It's like just exactly stopping and acknowledging that this is happening, and maybe talk to a loved one, a friend. Maybe we have different like coping I don't know if coping is the right word, but like coping mechanisms. It can be talking to somebody. For me, it was going out on a walk. It's so many different things. It depends on what works for you. But just like taking action, let's put it that way. Just yeah. But you also, like, sometimes we go through like events, or like maybe it was like a call with a customer where it went wrong, right? And sometimes we go back and start thinking about it, and we need to know how to like digest all of those things. And we all have different ways.
Yes. And I feel like sometimes people don't know what their mechanism is, right? They don't know what their process is, so they don't even try it, and they just like go like, okay, whatever, this must be true, what I'm thinking must be true, instead of taking that second to either take that walk, or just like pause and say, like, is this thought coming from me or what I think people are thinking?
Right.
And that's really hard to separate. So it takes a lot of change and mistakes and all of the things that you went through to kind of like acknowledge that. And I know you went through a lot of change, because you had to move to another city for this job. So it wasn't only that you were just trying to learn the ropes with having those people skills, but you were also doing it in another city. So can you tell me about that? How was that transition?
Yeah, that transition was interesting. Let's put it that way. Like, because it wasn't easy, of course, because me, all my life I've lived with my sister and like with my family. I've never like been alone. And once you move to a new city where you don't know anyone, and you're living in an apartment on your own, and you leave work and you have no one to talk to, that's hard. But it forces you to, connect with yourself and get to know yourself. And I know this sounds so weird, but like, learning how to be alone is so important. And for me, it was because I didn't know how to do it. I lived with my sister all of my life. I had somebody to talk to all the time, or like I always had something to do in the weekends. Whenever, for instance, we moved to Dallas, for example, like if we were bored, we will be like, okay, let's go to like Target together, and we will go to Target, look at the, I don't know, whatever, the books or everything. They have everything there. So for me, it was like, okay, but I didn't know how to do stuff on my own, right? Like, okay, I can go to Target on my own.
It's not as fun.
It's not as fun. Or, even like having these like dates on my own. I will be like, I want to try that restaurant that's so good that I saw on Instagram. But, sometimes I was like, oh, I'm not going to go because I have no one to go with, right? And at some point I was like, I can't keep doing this, right? So it was like, okay, I'm going to go on my own to the restaurant, to the walk, to the whatever. And it's also when you're like, I had to also get out of my comfort zone, right? Because here in Dallas, I had my group of friends. Like, I didn't have to put too much effort into meeting new people, right? But there was a point where I was like, okay, I need to do something, right?
Yeah.
So I was very like intentional about it. So, for instance, I had this mentality, which is the yes mentality. So it was like, whatever, if somebody at work will tell me, hey, Barbara, we're going to happy hour. Yes. Oh, Barbara, we're going to a boat party. Yes. It didn't matter, because before I was like, oh, but who's going? At what time? What's the boat like? I would be like, oh, and then I would decide. Then I wouldn't ask any questions. I would be like, yeah, I'll be there. And I will show up, and it could be a complete disaster, Well, sometimes it wasn't a disaster. So, whenever you're putting yourself out there and opening yourself to new experiences, you also need to acknowledge that some of those experiences are not going to be good. Maybe they will suck. Maybe you won't meet anyone. People are not friendly. It doesn't matter. But it's just putting yourself out there and being very intentional. Or also when you're making new friends, it's also being intentional that you want to make friends. And when people know that you want to make friends, they're going to be like, oh, okay, let me invite you to this, let me invite you to that. So it's just being intentional with that, at least with like meeting new people. right? Which was the thing that I struggled with the most, because at my job, it was cool. I was going to the office, my apartment, new city. I loved Austin. So I didn't like have any problems with that. It was more the part that I cared about the most, which was meeting new people. So
I think, it's something really valuable that you learn because of what you said. Being alone, it's hard at the beginning for anybody, right? And I think there's this feeling that if you are alone, then you feel lonely, instead of looking at it like solitude, right? Which is like completely different. Like loneliness is, the negative feeling of being alone, and solitude is the positive feeling of being alone. So what you were doing was enjoying your solitude in a way, and that like sort of like prepared you to be more open to meet new people. So like what advice would you give to someone who's really struggling in a new city or in a new environment? Because like you don't need to move to another city, but like in a new environment where they don't know if they should put themselves out there because they're afraid of, I don't know, rejection or not having a good time, or like, whatever negative experience they might have. What would you say to those people?
Yeah. So I will say it's not that serious. So if you meet someone and that person rejects you, they don't want to be your friend, it doesn't matter. Like, yeah, you're going to meet somebody new. So for me, for instance, this is something that you can apply as well. It's like, before I wouldn't, like, if I was bored on a Saturday night, I wouldn't text anyone. I would be like, people have to text me, that sort of like mentality.
Yeah.
And then I was like, oh, I met this like girl at the gym, and she gave me her number. Let me text her to see what she's up to. So don't be afraid of like being rejected. Like, people have lives, they're busy. Maybe they won't be able to do something, but maybe they are, and they will invite you, right? So it's just like reaching out to people, and at some point I wasn't afraid to like, speaking to random people, because I met a lot of people at work, but I also wanted to meet people outside of work, right? Sure. So for instance, that example that I gave you at the beginning with the girl named Oriana at the gym, like, before, I would have never talked to somebody random at the gym ever. And at the point I was like, oh, your name is Oriana. Like, are you going to, and just starting conversation. Or like, sometimes I will hear people speaking Spanish and I will be like, oh, are you from, I don't know, Colombia or whatever, like depending on the accent that I will hear. And then that will spark a new conversation. So just like, that sort of thing, just don't be afraid. And if people look at you like judgy, like, oh, why are you talking to me? It doesn't matter. So don't be afraid to be rejected. It's basically my advice. Like, just put yourself out there, talk to new people. Like, if you see something interested in them, if you like their energy as well, like super, super important. So yeah, reach out to people. Just, you bring your own opportunities to yourself.
And at the end of the day, like, their rejection is gonna be insignificant in the long term.
Right. You're never gonna see them again, probably.
Never. And I feel like this is something that I feel like we had at the beginning, where, how you said like, oh, I'm gonna wait till they text me.
Right.
And it's this sort of like pride, right? Of like, I'm important, right? And I want to be texted. And I think that should still be the standard, right? For certain things. But I feel like we're like, oh, no, why would I reach out to someone? What if they say no?
Right.
The worst thing is that they say no. And that's it. Then you jump to the next thing, or you jump into your next adventure, the next relationship. So I love that.
Yeah, no, you're making a good point, because at some point, if you reach out to people many times and they never like can hang out or want to, then of course that person is just not your friend, right?
Yeah.
But I guess it gets to a point, okay, we need to acknowledge that people, have other things to do. But but that's another whole other topic about friendships and, you want people to show up the way that you show up, and it's just an entirely different topic. But yeah.
Yeah. It's a complex topic for sure that I know that we've discussed many times, but I think you did amazing at embracing change. And I think it really prepared you for other changes that came along in your life, right? Like, I feel like it just allows you to make friendships in a completely different way. You're more like carefree, right? You enjoy your time alone, but you also enjoy your time with people. And I feel like when you've never lived alone, you never experienced that. So like, would you recommend for everyone at least one time in their life to live alone?
Yeah. I mean, of course, there's some people that can't for like financial reasons or whatever. But if you have the opportunity to live alone and also move to a new city, honestly, I feel like it completely changes your perspective. Just, being by yourself and I don't know, it's a good experience for sure, and you get to know yourself, because sometimes you're not alone when you're alone with your thoughts, or you go out on a walk and you're not listening to music, stuff like that. You can also like do this without like moving to alone. You can also like go on walks and just, you know, go on different experiences without having to be with somebody, right? I feel like I really recommend that, so you can connect with yourself. And this is another topic, like you cannot expect to connect with people if you can't connect with yourself. And this is like super deep.
Yes.
But and the same thing with relationships. You cannot expect to get into a relationship without you like loving yourself and, you know, connecting with yourself, I feel like. But of course we're all different, but at least that's for me.
No, I completely agree. I think up until you start really like, oh, what's it like for me to spend a day alone? What it's like for me to entertain myself, right? How are you going to ever feel that if you've always tried to do that with another person, but you've never tried to do that with yourself, right? When you are then when that person, of course, we would not want that. But like if that person leaves, who's left with you? Like yourself, and
Right.
you have not spent any time getting to know you.
Exactly. And for instance, with myself, I have so much fun on my own. So for me now to like date somebody or whatever, that person has to be a lot of fun, because my alone time, it's the best. I have the best time. I listen to music or whatever. Like it's the best time ever.
I
So
love that.
for me to just like, you know, and sometimes people just go like get into relationships just because they're scared to be alone. So this is a way to avoid that, because that's most likely going to fail if you do that, right?
So when you've like, you know, you transition to a new city and you learn not to only be with yourself, but also like you learn to look at friendships in a different way. Like they're not that serious. Like whoever's going to hang out with you will hang out with you, and whoever's not going to hang out with you is not going to hang out with you. And that takes like some sort of like building that confidence and trust in yourself that everything's going to be okay at the end of the day, right? If the person is not going to hang out with you, it's going to be okay.
Yeah.
But you put yourself out there. So you made that intention. Like we go back to what you said, being intentional.
Yeah.
Have you taken, when you moved to Austin also, like, did you take that intentional in the workplace as well, to intentionally move yourself in the workplace? Because I know it's like different with like friendships.
Yeah, it's different, but I guess with in life in general, we have to be intentional about what we want, right? So for instance, when it's like at a job, I'm like, okay, I'm gonna become a subject matter expert at this, right? Or this project that I'm starting is gonna be a success. Or, you know, even like something silly as like, oh, you know, that person is gonna mentor me. It's stuff like that. I'm very intentional, and this comes to another topic of like manifesting as well. It's kind of complex, but
I know we love this topic.
I love it. But in terms of like being intentional, I feel like we need to be very clear whenever we get into a situation, a project, a job, whatever it is, very clear about what we want to accomplish and what we want to do.
Yes.
So for instance, at my job, I set my own objectives. Like I'm going to be an expert. For instance, I specialize in AI. I'm going to be an expert at like, I don't know, MLOps, whatever it is. So I'm very intentional. I haven't started doing that, but I know that's what I want. Or I don't know. I'm at a point where I want to be a better like business consultant. So I told my manager, this is like very like different from what people in my role do, but I'm like, oh, you know, I want to expand my skills and start doing more like consulting sort of work. And he's like, yeah, do it. You know, so I feel like it's just being very clear with what you want. And I feel like here, if you like write out your goals, is super important, and you look at them every day and you're like, oh, I'm getting closer to that. And you do everything with intention, and you show up as the person that has already accomplished those goals. And that's what I try to do, show up as that person. So that's why we need to be intentional. And sometimes, of course, like we need to go with the flow and that life happens. But whenever we want to accomplish something or get somewhere, that's what we need to do.
And I feel like you are the living evidence that manifestation works. Like I feel like everything that you've manifested has presented itself. And we're always talking about how we set things into the universe and they happen. And we said as a joke before in our group of friends, like everything we say happens, whatever. But it is true. Like when you put certain things, obviously if you're not a believer, that's okay. But I do think that there's a strong power in words. Not even looking at it as manifesting, but in the words that you do. And even when you said, you know, I will have that mentor, right? I will have that person as my mentor. You're not saying that you want it. You're saying that it will happen.
Right.
And then it does happen. But I think it's because you match your words with your actions. It's not that you're just going to say, that's going to be my mentor, and then walk away and not do anything about it.
Right.
Right? You match those actions with the intention that you're setting. So I think that's also super important.
Yeah, and also if you're listening to this and you're like, oh, manifestation, what? I feel like people will think that. No, but it's not like that. You know, it's here. My point is that you will manifest, or something will happen for you if you show up as the person that already has that. It has nothing to do with like magic or anything like that.
Yeah.
It's more like the way you show up is the thing that matters. And that's why I recommend having like a vision board where you like see your goals every day, and you're like, okay, I'm getting closer to that. Or, you know, it's just, it helps you like be centered in what you want, because sometimes life happens, bad things happen, and we forget about our goals and what we want. And that's why I feel like that's why we need to be intentional, because it's not like, oh, magically you're gonna get a big house with like no, or you're gonna get your dream job magically by just not like leaving your couch. That's not gonna happen by magic. So that's why I feel like manifesting, we can take it in a way that is just being very intentional.
I love that answer.
Yeah.
And I think I want to just finalize by telling, you know, like you said, getting your dream job, something as big as that, right? And you did. Even if it wasn't what you anticipated, you know, you got this amazing job, you got this amazing experience, because not only it was like a new job, but a new city, new friendships, new experiences, new time alone. So you got this like super great experience that at the beginning you didn't even know that you were ready for, and turns out that you were. So to finalize, what would you say to anyone right now who wants to have that dream job, who's like dreaming of it, but they say, I'm not qualified, I don't have the resources, I don't have the support, I can't do it? They want it, but they're afraid to go for it. What would you say to those people?
Yeah, that's a good question. And sometimes we're so afraid to fail. And I guess the number one thing is, don't be afraid. You will fail. You will. Like, for instance, one example of this is how I failed whenever I didn't pass the interview for a software engineering internship at Google. And, you know, I failed. I didn't get it that time. But like, life happened after. And okay, I almost failed if my family didn't push me to apply. So also, like, if you have a good support system of people that will push you to be better, that's very important. If you can surround yourself with those people. If you don't have that support system, of course, you can be your own. So don't be like me at that time where I was like, oh, this is not possible for me. No, it is possible. Take the actions needed. And something that I do a lot right now is that if opportunities present themselves and I feel like I'm not ready, and it can be anything, and I'm like, oh, I'm not prepared enough, I'm not there yet, or I need to study more, or I need to prepare myself. No, you're ready, just go for it. You know, we grow when we're uncomfortable. You will figure it out. And that's usually when people present me with opportunities. I'm like, yes. I say yes to almost every opportunity that presents itself, and then I figure it out along the way. So I feel like that's the mentality that you need to have. You will always figure it out. And look at where you are right now. Like, you have figured out life. Whoever is listening to this, you have figured it out. You have gotten to this point. So don't be afraid to go for what you want. Yeah.
I love it. Thank you so much, Barbie. We're going to wrap it up. But this was amazing. Thank you so much for doing this.
No, thank you for having me. This was amazing.
Of course.